Monday morning was the day I had been waiting for almost a year. The traffic light blinked green, and I crossed the road with my worn leather briefcase in my hand. The glass and metal building in front of me was the headquarters of the Freeman Insurance Company. I stopped for a moment, looking at the logo, a stylized male figure with arms outstretched against the sun. The logo hadn't changed since Grandpa Rudolph founded the company in 1987. My name is Elliot Carroll, and I was 21 years old when I joined my late grandfather's company. Actually, I came in for a job interview. No one at Freeman knew I was Rudolph Blackhorse's grandson, and I wanted to keep it that way for as long as possible. My grandfather died 4 years ago when I was graduating from a private, closed school in St. James. I expected to inherit a stake in the company, and the will met my expectations. My grandfather gave me 33% of the company's shares. He divided the rest of his stake among management and gave management to a board of directors headed by Joseph Reindold's. I also got a letter advising me to learn to appreciate things rather than take them for granted. Typical grandfather. Even after his death, he continued to educate me. In addition, my grandfather left me almost $3 million in Morgan Stanley. My mother's last name, Carroll, was the perfect cover. I graduated from college with honors and was ready for infiltration. It was my first real job, and excitement was mixed with anticipation. "Good morning. What can I do for you?" The girl behind the front desk smiled. "Good morning. Elliot Carroll. I have an interview with the claims department at 9:30. After checking the data in the computer, she gave me a temporary pass and showed me the way to the elevators. Second floor, office 212. The Human Resources Department was a bright room with panoramic windows. A middle-aged woman with a short haircut and heavy-rimmed glasses sat at a computer. "Mr. Carroll, have a seat." Patricia Winters, head of HR. The interview went smoothly. I had prepared a resume that made me a good but not outstanding candidate. Qualified enough to pass the screening, but not enough to raise suspicion. "Your resume is impressive, especially for your age," Patricia said. "Although you have no work experience, your academic achievements and internships look promising. Why did you choose Freeman?" "Looking for growth opportunities," I answered with a prepared phrase. "Freeman has a reputation as an innovative company with sustainable values. Plus, you specialize in comprehensive insurance, which is exactly where I want to grow." Patricia nodded, making notes in her notebook. Then came the standard questions about my strengths and weaknesses, and a few case studies of insurance claims. Nothing I couldn't handle. "Well, Elliot, I think you're a good fit. Standard probationary period is 3 months, after which we'll renegotiate your terms. When are you ready to start?" "As soon as tomorrow," I smiled. "Great. Then we'll see you tomorrow at 9 o'clock. You will go through the briefing, get a permanent pass, and get acquainted with the team." The next day I was at the office half an hour before the appointed time. The company occupied 2 floors of the building, and the first day turned into endless filling out forms, studying the corporate code and touring the departments. By lunchtime, my head was spinning with new names and faces. My immediate supervisor, Gregory Foster, was a short, balding man in his mid-50s with a keen eye and a habit of constantly fidgeting with his tie. "At Freeman, we value initiative," he said, showing me my workstation, a small cubicle with a computer, a telephone, and a stack of files. "But it's also important to follow protocols. We don't just write checks and sign contracts. We protect the company's interests and fairly assess damages." I nodded, looking around the office. The open space was divided by low partitions into work areas. Employees leaned over computers. Some were talking on the phone. It was nothing special, a typical office anthill. "There's Olivia," Gregory exclaimed, noticing a girl walking by. "Olivia, this is Elliot, our new specialist. Elliot, meet Olivia Marsh, one of our best analysts." Olivia didn't look like a typical office worker. Her dark red hair was in a careless bun, Her face was not wearing any makeup. Her clothes were simple black slacks and a loose blouse in the color of sea waves. But what struck me most were her eyes, dark brown, almost black, with a special, attentive expression. "Nice to meet you," she said, extending her hand. The handshake was firm and confident. "Likewise," I replied, trying not to betray my immediate interest. "Olivia specializes in complicated cases," Gregory explained. "If you have any questions, she's always helpful." "Don't exaggerate, Greg," Olivia smiled. "I'm just doing my job. By the way, did I hear that the new real estate insurance report is ready?" "Yeah, we just got it yesterday. I'll email it to you." Olivia nodded and left as quickly as she'd come, leaving behind a light scent of something fresh, not perfume, more like shampoo or lotion. The first week was spent adapting. I was getting to grips with the systems, learning internal procedures and trying to memorize the names of my colleagues. Freeman turned out to be a pretty conservative company, despite its innovative image. Many processes were still done the old-fashioned way with tons of paperwork and unnecessary approvals. On Friday, Gregory announced that company director Joseph Reindold's wanted to meet the new employees in person. This was my first opportunity to see the man who actually took my grandfather's place. "Don't be nervous," Gregory advised as we walked up to the third floor. "Reindold's likes to impress, but he's a fair manager. Just be polite and don't argue with him." The principal's office occupied a corner of the floor and was staggering in size. A huge oak desk, leather armchairs, walls hung with diplomas and awards. Behind the desk sat Joseph Reindold's, a tall man of about 55 with impeccably styled graying hair and a tenacious gaze. He wore a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, probably tailor-made, and the impression was spoiled by a too large pin in his tie. "Ah, new shots," he said without getting up. "Come closer, don't be shy." There were 3 of us newcomers, and the director asked each of us a few questions in turn: where we were from, where we had studied, what our career plans were. When my turn came, I repeated my legend about my interest in comprehensive insurance and my desire to develop in this field. "Good for you," Reindold's nodded. "Insurance is all about reliability and a conservative approach, no risky experiments. That's how I got Freeman to where it is today after the founder died." I held back a chuckle. Grandfather, as I remembered him, was known for his innovative approaches. That was why Freeman had once been successful. It offered something its competitors didn't. The meeting was over and we were on our way out when, through the panoramic window, I noticed a bright yellow ugly car in the parking lot. The color was so garish that it looked like a lemon lollipop. "Wow!" I couldn't help myself. "Whose caramel is that in the parking lot?" There was an awkward silence in the office. Gregory coughed and the other newcomer, Mark, I think, stared at the floor. "This is my car, Mr. Carroll," Reindold said coldly. "Oh, I'm sorry, sir," I said, embarrassed. "It's very bright, in a good way." "Of course," the headmaster replied dryly. "Brightness attracts attention, Mr. Carroll, and in business, it's important to attract attention. I hope you'll learn that in the course of your employment with us. Judging by my tone, I've just been blacklisted by the director." Gregory practically pushed us out of the office and hissed at us in the elevator. "Reindold loves his car. What were you thinking?" "Sorry, it slipped out," I mumbled. I was still embarrassed. After all, everyone has their oddities. To my surprise, the incident had an unexpected consequence. Olivia Marsh came up to me at the end of the day, just as I was about to leave for home. "I heard you made a good joke about the boss's car," she said with a half smile. "Pretty bold for the first week." "It wasn't a joke, just an observation," I replied. "What do you think of the car?" "I think it reflects his personality perfectly. Flashy, pretentiously chic and always out of place." I laughed. At that moment, I thought I had found my first ally in the company. "Going home?" I asked. How about a coffee? I'm new in town. It would be nice to learn about Springfield from a local. Olivia thought for a moment, then shook her head. I can't today. I have to finish my report by Monday, but we can do it sometime next week. Okay, I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. As I walked outside, I looked back at the Freeman building. It had been a busy first week. I'd gotten to know the staff, turned the director against me, and taken an interest in Olivia Marsh. Not a bad start for my mission to reclaim my grandfather's legacy. Week 2 at Freeman began with the obligatory corporate ethics training, a boring presentation on company values that looked great on paper but were often ignored in practice. However, it gave me the opportunity to observe my colleagues and memorize names. My claims department was headed by Gregory Foster, and there were about 20 people working in it. The hierarchy was simple. Junior specialists like me handled typical cases, mid-level analysts like Olivia handled complex claims, and team leaders made the final decisions. Above us towered senior management, CFO Victor Stein, COO Paul Harrison, and, of course, CEO Joseph Reindold's. After the training, Gregory called me into his office and handed me a folder with my first assignments. These are simple cases, Elliot. Car damage, apartment flooding, electronics theft. Go through the paperwork, make an assessment, and come up with a solution. It's all by the book. And don't forget the deadlines. No more than 3 days per case. Got it. I took the folder. And who makes the final decision? On probation, it's me, Gregory smiled. After that, it's you, if the case is within your authority. By the way, did you set up the computer? Yeah, I got access to the system yesterday. That's good. Then let's get to work. I spent the next few days immersed in documentation and corporate systems. Freeman used outdated software, but with a recently added web interface that only slightly masked the archaic data structure. Once I understood the system, I was able to process typical cases quickly, and by the end of the week I was coping with the norm. As a junior insurer, I often had to travel to clients' homes to assess damage and collect documents. It was both the most tiring and the most interesting part of the job. I drove around the city in a compact Ford with the Freeman logo on the doors, visiting different neighborhoods, from upscale neighborhoods with mansions to old apartment buildings on the outskirts. These visits provided a unique opportunity to observe people's lives in moments of stress. Flooded apartments, wrecked cars, damaged property. Behind every insurance claim was a little personal drama. Some clients greeted me with relief, others with suspicion, fearing that the company would find a way to deny payment. One case in particular was particularly memorable. An elderly woman named Martha Simmons, who lived alone in a small, neat house in the suburbs. She had been flooded during a heavy downpour due to a burst old roof. When I arrived, she greeted me with a cup of hot tea and homemade cookies despite the soaked ceiling and buckets placed throughout the house. "Young man, I know insurance agents look for any excuse to deny payment," she said as I surveyed the damage. "But I've paid my premiums faithfully for 30 years. Even your predecessor, Mr. Blackhorse. He always said that Freeman was first and foremost about being honest with his customers. When I heard my grandfather's name, I almost choked on a cookie. Turns out Martha was one of the company's first customers. She told me how her grandfather personally came to her after the first insurance claim and helped her sort out the documents. As I drove away from Martha, I decided I would do everything I could to make sure she got the full payout, even if I had to argue with Reindold's. Fortunately, the case was clear and the payout was approved without too many questions. My real goal, however, was to learn about the company from the inside. I spent my lunch breaks talking to colleagues in different departments, gently asking about structure, processes, and, of course, management. Information was gathered bit by bit. Joseph Reindold's had joined the company under his grandfather, starting as a financial analyst and gradually rising to deputy director. After his grandfather's death, he convinced the board of directors that he should be the one to lead Freeman. The board now consisted of 6 people: Reinbold's himself, Stein, Harrison, and 3 outside directors, one of whom was a partner in a large law firm that serviced the company, another a former state insurance commissioner, and the third an old friend of Reinbold's who owned a chain of car dealerships. This information was useful, but not enough. I needed to understand the distribution of stock and the real financial position of the company. Shareholder reports were only available on a private portal to which I had no access. However, with 33% of the shares through a trust set up by my grandfather, I had a legal right to this information. I just didn't want to reveal my identity just yet. On Friday, as I was finishing up another report, Olivia approached my desk. "How's it going, rookie?" she asked, taking a seat on the edge of my desk. She was wearing a dark blue pantsuit, her hair in a neat bun. "I'm doing fine," I replied, closing the report file. "Nothing complicated, although the system here is peculiar." "That's an understatement," Olivia grinned. "Reinbold saves money on everything except his watch collection and sports cars. Look, I thought you said you were new in town. Is the coffee offer still on the table?" I didn't see that coming, so I couldn't hide my surprise. "Of course it is. Right now, if you're not busy." We chose a small coffee shop a couple blocks from the office. The place was cozy with vintage furniture and dim lighting. Olivia ordered an espresso. I chose an Americano. "Tell me, where are you from?" she asked as we settled at a corner table. "Woodston, a small town about 2 hours from here," I answered, sticking to the story. "Grew up there, then went to a boarding school in St. James, then college. Free man was my first serious job. And why insurance? Not the most exciting field for a young man." I hesitated for a moment, searching for words. "A family tradition, you might say. My grandfather was involved in insurance. He always said it wasn't just a business, but helping people through difficult times in life." Olivia looked at me carefully. "Sounds like you were close to your grandfather." "Yes." I didn't hide my emotions. "He taught me a lot." "How long have you been with the company?" 4 years. I came straight out of college. Reinbold's had just taken over after the founder died." "And how do you like working with him?" Olivia cringed. "Let's just say that Reynolds is kept in office by the support of the board of shareholders. They're used to him. Reinbold's looks great at events. He's great at making a spectacle of himself. And it's mostly Gregory and Victor who do his work for him. Safe. We've stopped taking risks, introducing new products, expanding the market. We're just serving our current clients and keeping our heads down." That was consistent with my observations. Grandpa was always looking to innovate, and Reinbold seems to have chosen a strategy of maintaining the status quo. Could this be temporary? A period of stabilization after a change in leadership? 4 years is too long a stabilization period. Olivia sipped her espresso. But enough about work. What do you think of Springfield? We spent the next hour talking about the city, restaurants, parks, and cultural events. Olivia had lived here all her life and knew every corner. She spoke with such enthusiasm that I couldn't help but listen. She was sincere, a rare quality in the business world. As we were saying goodbye at the entrance to the coffee shop, I decided, "Why don't you show me the city tomorrow? I was planning to explore the neighborhood anyway." Olivia thought for a moment, then nodded. "Good idea. Meet me at Riverview Park at 11. That's where the farmers market opens on Saturdays." "It's a deal." The weekend flew by. Olivia turned out to be a great guide, showing me not only the tourist spots, but also the hidden gems of the city: small bookstores, cozy cafes, historical buildings with interesting stories. We talked about everything but work, and by Sunday evening I caught myself thinking that for the first time in a long time I felt comfortable with another person. On Monday, reality reminded itself in the form of a call to Reinbold's. The director's secretary, a stern woman in her 40s, informed me that I was expected in his office at 10 o'clock. Gregory, on hearing this, looked worried. "What have you done to him?" he asked, nervously adjusting his tie. Reynolds rarely summons junior staff. "I have no idea," I replied sincerely. "Maybe he wants to apologize for the incident with the car?" Gregory rolled his eyes. "Very funny. Just be careful, okay?" Reynolds doesn't forget a grudge. At 10:00, I knocked on the door of the director's office. Inside, Reynolds was sitting at a massive desk poring over some papers. Next to him stood Victor Stein, the CFO, a tall, thin man with balding hair and thin-rimmed glasses. "Ah, Carol," Reynolds pointed to the chair across the desk. "Have a seat." I sat down, keeping my expression neutral. Reynolds looked at me with a scrutinizing gaze as if trying to see something. "How is your adjustment to the company going?" he asked. "Good, sir. Colleagues are helping. The system is gradually becoming clearer." "That's good to hear. You know, Mr. Carroll, I've looked over your first reports. Gregory praises your work, but—" He paused. "I have some observations." Reynolds pulled one of my reports out of a folder and put it in front of me. "Here you recommended full payment for the flooding of the apartment. But if you had studied the contract more carefully, you would have noticed clause 7.3, which limits our liability for damage to third-party property." I quickly reviewed the report. Reynolds was technically correct, but the clause he was referring to was written in small print and deliberately confusing. "I felt that the principle of good faith applied in this case," I replied. "The client has been with us for 8 years without a single insurance claim. The amount is not so large, but the reputational risks of refusal—" "Reputational risks?" Reynolds grinned. "Mr. Carroll, we're an insurance company, not a charity. Our job is to honor the terms of the contract, not to hand out money out of pity. Victor, explain our financial policy to the young man." Stein coughed. "You see, Elliot, every unreasonable payment reduces our profits, and profits are dividends for shareholders, bonuses for employees, investments in development. We have to be rational." "I understand," I nodded, holding back my irritation. "But isn't customer loyalty a long-term investment? Failure to pay could result in the loss of a customer, and attracting a new one would cost more than that payment." A look of surprise flashed across Reynolds' face, quickly replaced by irritation. "Mr. Carroll, I think you overestimate your competence. While you're on probation, your decisions are subject to review. In this case, I overruled your recommendation and reduced your pay by 30%. Do you personally review the reports of new hires?" I couldn't resist. "I am personally involved in all aspects of running the company," Reynolds said, "and I advise you to read your contracts carefully. That's all. You can go." I left the office feeling a mixture of anger and surprise. Reynolds was clearly trying to demonstrate power because he never read the reports of ordinary employees. It was Victor and Gregory who did it for him. I guess my caramel joke had hurt him more than I thought. When I returned to my workstation, I found a message from Olivia. "Come see me when you're free." Her work area was at the other end of the office, among the mid-level analysts. "How'd it go?" she asked as I approached. "Everyone already knows that Reynolds called you on the carpet." "News travels fast." I perched on the edge of her desk. "He overturned my recommendation on the payout, said I hadn't scrutinized the contract closely enough." Olivia shook her head. "Typical Reynolds. Likes to show who's boss. But it's odd that he'd take care of your report personally. Gregory or his deputy usually does that." "I was thinking the same thing." I lowered my voice. "Listen, I have an idea. I want to work on something a little more complex than the standard cases. Anything interesting?" Olivia tapped her fingers on the table thoughtfully. "Actually, there is. A commercial real estate insurance case. There's a fire in a warehouse and the owner is demanding full payment, but there's suspicion of arson to get the insurance. Gregory's got me on it, but It's a lot of work and I could use an assistant. Sounds interesting, I smiled. When do we start? Right now. Sit down, I'll show you the materials. Olivia and I spent the next 2 weeks working on the case. Officially, I was still doing my standard tasks, but I spent all my free time on the investigation. We studied documents, analyzed the warehouse owner's financial situation, and talked to witnesses and experts. Olivia was a great mentor, attentive to detail, methodical, but not afraid to come up with bold hypotheses. We complemented each other. She brought experience and procedural knowledge. I brought a fresh perspective and out-of-the-box ideas. Gradually, the picture became clearer. The warehouse owner, Mark Johnson, was indeed struggling financially. His electronics distribution business was losing customers to competition from online retailers. The insurance had been taken out just 6 months before the fire, and the amount of coverage far exceeded the actual value of the stored goods. A classic case of insurance fraud, Olivia concluded when we had collected all the evidence. Johnson hired someone to set the fire so he could collect the insurance and pay off his debts. I agree, but we need hard evidence, I said. Otherwise he'll sue, and the company will lose more money in legal fees. I have an idea. Olivia leaned closer. Johnson claims that there was a shipment of new smartphones worth $500,000 in the warehouse. We can send an official inquiry to the manufacturer whether the smartphones were actually shipped to Johnson, in what quantity and with what serial numbers. That's a good idea. I have a contact at that company, Olivia smiled. A former classmate who works in the logistics department. He'll help. The plan worked. Olivia's contact confirmed that the shipment of smartphones had never been shipped to Johnson's company. We compiled a detailed report including all the evidence we collected and gave it to Gregory. He was impressed with our work. Great investigation, he said after reviewing the documents. I'll get this to the lawyers, and they'll prepare a formal denial of payment. Well done, guys. Especially you, Elliot. That's a pretty good result for a rookie. The next day, Reynolds called me in again. This time he was alone and looked less hostile. Gregory showed me your joint report with Olivia on the Johnson case, he said, pointing to a folder on his desk. Impressive work, especially checking the serial numbers. That was clever. Thank you, sir, I replied, surprised by the praise. Don't relax, Carol. One successful investigation doesn't make you an expert. But I appreciate the initiative and attention to detail. Keep it up, and maybe you'll really succeed in our company. After that meeting, my position in the company changed. Gregory started assigning more complex cases to me, and my co-workers started treating me with more respect. Even Reynolds would nod a greeting in the hallways when I met him casually, although he still looked at me with suspicion. The main result, however, was the strengthening of my relationship with Olivia. Working together had brought us closer together, and now we had regular lunches together, discussing not only work issues but also personal interests. I learned that she was interested in photography, loved jazz, and dreamed of opening her own consulting agency. In turn, I talked about my childhood, my studies in a closed school, my travels with my grandfather. Of course, avoiding mentioning his name in connection to Free Man. At the same time, I continued to gather information about the company. Through a shared network folder, I managed to get access to some of the financial reports. The picture was interesting. After Reynolds' arrival, the company had indeed become more profitable, but at the expense of reduced spending on development and innovation. The customer portfolio was barely growing, but dividends to shareholders had doubled. I was particularly interested in the shareholder structure. In addition to my 33% owned by the trust and the 20% divided among management, there was another 47%. These shares were distributed among several investment funds, but I noticed a strange pattern. All of these funds were linked to a single holding company registered in the Cayman Islands. I needed to find out more about this company, but accessing such information from the office was risky. I decided to continue my investigation at home, using anonymous sources of information. On the last working day of the week, Olivia invited me to her home for dinner. "Just a friendly dinner," she said, noticing my surprise. "I'm not a bad cook, and you're probably tired of restaurant food and convenience foods." "I'd love to," I replied, feeling my pulse quicken. That evening, as I got ready for Olivia, I thought about my situation. In a month, I'd made significant progress in understanding Freeman's internal structure and decision-making mechanisms. I'd found an ally in Olivia, and I'd probably earned some respect from Reindold's. But most importantly, I was on the trail of the company's strange stock scheme. My intuition told me that something important was hidden here, perhaps a clue to Reindold's true intentions. I glanced at my watch. It was time to leave. The investigation could wait until tomorrow. Tonight I had dinner with a girl who was occupying my thoughts more and more, despite my original plan to keep a low profile and focus only on business. Life, as usual, made its adjustments to the most thoughtful plans. Wednesday morning began with an unexpected announcement: a general meeting in the conference room at 10 o'clock. Gregory looked worried, constantly glancing at his watch and poring over some papers. When I asked him what was going on, he just shook his head. "Quarterly results," he said briefly. "You'll find out soon enough." By 10 o'clock, all the employees of Freeman's headquarters were gathered in the spacious conference room on the top floor. People were talking in low voices, and tension was in the air. I spotted Olivia at the window and headed toward her. "Hi," I said, shaking her hand. "Do you know what this is about?" She nodded, but before she could answer, Reindold's and his deputies entered the room. The CEO looked stern, which didn't bode well. "Good morning, colleagues," Reynolds began, taking the podium. "You all know that Freeman has always been known for its stability and reliability. This past quarter, however, has not been a good one." He paused, looking around the hushed room, and continued. "Profits are down 8% from last year. This is unacceptable. The board is concerned. The shareholders are not happy. I have been able to identify the underlying causes." Reindold's nodded to Stein, and a presentation with graphs and tables appeared on the big screen. "First, our operating expenses have gone up. Second, several major clients have not renewed their contracts. And third," he paused dramatically, "some of our employees have been inexcusably negligent in dealing with important clients." Reindold's flipped the slide. A list of 5 names appeared on the screen. Third on the list was Olivia's name. These people had made serious mistakes that resulted in lost clients or excessive payments. Each of them would receive a reprimand and lose their quarterly bonus. In addition, Olivia Chen. I turned to Olivia. She stood motionless, her fingers clutching the file folder, white with tension. "Made a particularly serious mistake with Turner Industries. Because of her faulty risk analysis, not only did we lose a client, but we also paid out $300,000 in compensation. Miss Chen not only forfeits her bonus, but is also fined 1 month's salary." A whisper ran through the room. Such a severe punishment was unprecedented for the company. Olivia remained outwardly calm, but I saw her clench her teeth. Reindold's went on and on about cost-saving measures and new targets, but I wasn't listening. Something wasn't right here. I'd been working with Olivia for almost 2 months, and I knew how thorough and careful she was. A mistake of this magnitude seemed unlikely. After the meeting, Olivia walked quickly out of the auditorium. I caught up with her at the elevator. "Is it true?" I asked. "No," she said, not looking at me. "But who cares? The decision has been made. Tell me what really happened." Olivia paused, then nodded toward the fire escape. We went down 1 floor and came to a small, open area where the employees were smoking. No one was there now. "Turner Industries is an industrial holding company, one of our biggest clients," Olivia began, lighting up. "They insured a new production line, I was doing a risk assessment and pointed out serious problems with the fire suppression system. And what happened? Reinbold personally intervened. I don't know why. Said I was overreacting, that I couldn't choke off a key customer. 2 months ago, there was a fire at the factory. The system didn't work as I warned. We compensated them, but Turner still went to a competitor because he was disappointed in our service. Do you have proof? Your original report, documentation of the Reinbold's interference? I have the report, Olivia nodded. But Reynolds' order was verbal. He's cunning, never leaves a trace. And you're just going to accept it? Let him make a scapegoat out of you? Olivia grinned bitterly. And what do you suggest? Go against Reynolds? He'll destroy my career. I can't afford to lose this job. I've got an apartment loan. My mom needs expensive medication. She's stalling. I'm sorry. It's my problem, not yours. It's not fair, I said. And you know it. Welcome to the real world, Elliot. Olivia put out her cigarette. Come on, we have a lot of work to do. All day I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Olivia worked silently, focused, avoiding conversation. After work, I offered to have dinner with her, but she declined, saying she was tired. Back at home, I spent a few hours studying Freeman's financial statements for the past few years. What I saw confirmed my suspicions. The company was indeed losing market share, but not because of individual employee mistakes, but because of Reinbold's overall strategy. He was slashing development, marketing, and innovation spending, squeezing out maximum returns for shareholders in the short term. In the long term, however, this was leading to stagnation and loss of competitiveness. The next day, I decided to take action. During my lunch break, I approached Gregory's desk. Could we talk? I asked. In private. We walked out into a small, empty conference room. What is it, Elliot? Gregory asked when we sat down. It's about Olivia and Turner Industries. I know it's not her fault. She has a report where she warned of the risks. It was Reinbold's who made the decision to lower the rate. Gregory turned gloomy. I know, he said quietly. That admission took me by surprise. You know? And you did nothing? What could I have done? Gregory spread his hands. Reinbold's is the CEO. He's backed by the board. I have a family, a mortgage. But this isn't right. I raised my voice. Then I forced myself to calm down. Look, Gregory, if we allow Reynolds to pass the buck to the employees with impunity, what happens next? Today it's Olivia. Tomorrow it's you or me. Elliot, I appreciate your integrity, but get real. What are you going to do? Go to Reynolds and accuse him of lying? Gregory looked at me like I was crazy. Kid, you've been here less than a year. Don't ruin your career because of some sense of justice. It's not just a sense of justice, I countered. If Reinbold continues to run the company this way, Freeman will lose its position in the market. You see the quarterly reports for yourself. You're too young and naive, Gregory shook his head. But I won't stop you. Don't say I didn't warn you. After work, I knocked on Reinbold's office door. His secretary had already left, but the light was on. Come in, came the director's voice. Reinbold was sitting at his desk, studying some documents. He looked up and raised his eyebrows in surprise. Carol? What do you want? I want to talk about the situation with Olivia Chen and Turner Industries, I said, as I approached the desk. Oh, that, Reinbold leaned back in his chair. What exactly are you interested in? What you did at the meeting was unfair. Olivia warned of the risks, but you personally overruled her recommendations, and now you're blaming her for a mistake you made yourself. A look of surprise flashed across Reynolds' face, quickly replaced by cold fury. Are you accusing me of lying, Carol? I'm stating a fact. Olivia has a report to back up what she said. Interesting. Reinbold smiled slightly. What do you suggest? Cancel the fine and publicly admit that Olivia wasn't at fault. Reinbold laughed. You are either a very brave or a very stupid young man. Probably both. But let me give you some advice. In business, it's not truth that counts, it's perception. Right now, everyone perceives the situation as I've presented it. And that's not going to change, no matter what you do. I felt the anger building up inside of me. You don't understand, Reynolds. This isn't just about Olivia. You're systematically making decisions that are hurting the company in the long run. Cutting costs on new product development, refusing to expand the market, putting too much pressure on your employees, all of these things lead to a loss of competitiveness. Is that so? Reynolds stood up, resting his hands on the desk. And where did you, a junior insurance agent, get such an in-depth knowledge of strategic management? I studied business administration, I replied, not averting my gaze. And I see what's going on. You're squeezing maximum profits out of the company now with no thought for the future. That's not what the founder of Freeman would have wanted. Reynolds squinted. And you seem to know a lot about the founder and his desires. Enough to know that he didn't build the company to pay maximum dividends to shareholders at the expense of customers and employees. Look, Carol, Reynolds' voice became dangerously quiet. I don't know who you are or what you want, but you've gone too far. I could fire you right now, but I'm curious to observe you a little longer. Go back to your job and remember, I make the rules in this company. Not always, I replied, heading for the door. The rules can change. As I left the office, I took a deep breath. Conflict was inevitable, but I hadn't planned to escalate it this early. Reynolds would be wary now. We'd have to tread carefully. I decided to stop by Olivia's house to tell her about the conversation with Reynolds. She lived in a modern apartment building on the edge of downtown. As I made my way up to the 5th floor, I rang the doorbell. Olivia didn't open it right away. When the door opened, I saw that she had already changed into her home clothes, simple jeans and a loose sweater. Her hair, usually pulled back into a tight style, fell loosely around her shoulders. "Elliot?" she wondered. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk," I said. "Can I come in?" Olivia's apartment was small but cozy. Modern furniture, lots of books, and framed black and white photographs of her own work on the walls. "What's wrong?" she asked when we sat down in the living room. I told her about my conversation with Reynolds. As I told her, Olivia's face changed from surprise to alarm, then to anger. "Why did you do it?" she asked when I was done. "I didn't ask you to get involved. I couldn't stay out of it." "God, Elliot, do you realize he's going to be watching your every move now? You've jeopardized your job." She jumped up and paced the room. "So what now?" "Now we proceed with more caution," I said. "Olivia, Reynolds isn't just being unfair to the employees. He's leading the company to ruin. I've been going over the financials for the last few years." I told her my observations. Olivia listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she shook her head thoughtfully. "You're right. I've noticed it myself, but I've never seen the full picture. But what can we do? Reynolds has the support of the board of directors and major shareholders." "We can change the makeup of the shareholders," I said. "What do you mean?" I hesitated. Should I tell her my true identity? I'd only known Olivia for 2 months, but my gut told me I could trust her. Still, it was too soon to reveal my true identity. "I have some savings," I said. "Not much, but enough to start buying shares of the company through a broker. Freeman is a publicly traded company, though its stock isn't very liquid. If we take it step by step, no one will notice." "We?" Olivia raised an eyebrow. "I don't have that kind of money, Elliot. I'm not asking you to invest. I need your help with something else. You've been here longer, you know the processes and the people. Together we can come up with a plan to improve the company when we have enough clout." Olivia stared at me for a long time as if trying to figure it out. "Why is this so important to you?" she finally asked. "You've only been here 2 months. Why do you care so much about Freeman's future?" I walked over to her and took her hands in mine. Because I believe this company can be better, and because I can't stand injustice, especially when it comes to people that I care about. Olivia looked at our clasped hands, then looked up. They were a mixture of emotions, mistrust, hope, something else I couldn't quite put my finger on. "You're strange, Elliot Carroll," she said quietly. "Sometimes I feel like I don't know you at all." "Maybe I don't," I admitted, "but you can get to know me better, if you want to." She remained silent, not averting her gaze. Then, as if she'd made up her mind, she nodded slightly. "All right, I'll help you. But on one condition: no more open conflict with Reindold's. We'll proceed quietly and discreetly." "Deal," I smiled. "One more thing," Olivia added. "I want to know what's going on between us. Is this just a business partnership, or—" Instead of answering, I leaned in and kissed her. She froze for a moment, then responded by wrapping her arms around my neck. When we finally pulled away from each other, Olivia was smiling. "I thought so," she said. The next day, I contacted my lawyer and instructed him to find a reliable broker to buy Freeman stock anonymously. The lawyer suggested using several shell companies to hide the true buyer. This made the process more complicated but ensured confidentiality. We started small, just 0.5% of the stock available on the open market. The price was low because the company was considered stable but not growing. No one paid attention to this transaction. In the evening, I met up with Olivia again. We sat in her kitchen working out a plan of action. On a piece of paper, she drew Freeman's organizational structure and marked the key people. "This is where we need allies," she said, pointing to the new product development department. "Janet Lee, the department head, hates the Reindolds. He cut their budget by 70% last year." "What about Stein and Harrison?" I asked. "Are they completely loyal to Reynolds?" "Stein is. He's been with Reindold since college. Harrison, on the other hand." Olivia thought about it. "He's a pragmatist. He supports Reynolds as long as he's in power. But if he sees the wind changing, he might switch." We were still discussing details when my phone rang. It was the lawyer. "I have news," he said. "Orion Investments just dumped a large stake in Freeman on the market, about 5%. The price is low. They want to sell fast." "Orion Investments?" I interjected. "Is that one of the funds associated with the K-Man Company?" "Yes, that's right. Something has made them sell urgently. It's a good opportunity for us." I looked at Olivia, who raised her eyebrows questioningly. "Let's buy it," I decided. "Use every means at your disposal." I hung up the phone and explained the situation to Olivia. 5% is a lot," she said, "but it's still not enough to make a real impact. Reindold's controls at least 50% through various funds and management." "This is just the beginning," I replied. "We'll take it step by step." Olivia came over and hugged me. "You're full of surprises, Elliot Carroll. I hope you know what you're doing." "I hope so too," I smiled, pulling her closer. It was a hard road ahead, but the first step had been taken. I openly challenged Reindold's and began secretly buying up shares in the company. The game was on and the stakes were high, not only the future of Freeman but also my personal revenge for my grandfather. And somewhere in the middle between those goals came another, Olivia, a girl who suddenly became an important part of my life. It's been 2 years since my appearance at Freeman. A lot had changed in that time, although outwardly everything remained the same. Reindold's still sat in his office overlooking the city, running the company with an iron hand. Stein was still calculating profits and cutting costs. Harrison kept an eye on operations, trying not to draw too much attention to himself. I went from being a rookie to a seasoned employee, moving up 2 rungs on the ladder. I was now the head of a small team in the complex claims department. My team of 3 specialized in commercial property and business risk cases. Our efficiency was the highest in the department. We successfully denied fraudulent claims and found optimal solutions to complex situations. Reindold couldn't help but recognize my professional successes, although he did so through gritted teeth. Our open conflict turned into a cold war. We both observed formal decorum, but each was looking for ways to undermine the other. In my desk, in a secret compartment, was a folder with reports on all of Reindold's questionable decisions over the years. Olivia, using her connections in the company, had helped gather the information. We were careful not to draw attention to ourselves. "Elliot, you have a meeting in 15 minutes. Jessica, a young intern who had recently joined the team, reminded me. "Thank you," I nodded, keeping my eyes on the screen. "Can you prepare the materials on the Harrison Plaza case?" "Already done," she smiled. "The files are in your mail. Hard copies are on the conference room table." "Great," I finally looked up. "You're doing great, Jessica. Would you like to join the meeting?" "Can I?" Her eyes lit up. Sure. It's good for you to listen." The meeting was attended by representatives from the legal department and the risk assessment department. We were discussing a major insurance claim, a fire at Harrison Plaza Shopping Center. The owner was claiming a $5 million payout, but the circumstances of the accident raised questions. "Gentlemen," I began when everyone was gathered, "the situation is not simple. On the one hand, all the formal conditions for payment have been met. On the other hand, there are a few things that confuse me." I outlined the details: the strange coincidence of the fire with the end of the selling season, the new insurance policy, which had been taken out only 3 months before the accident, the disconnection of the security cameras the day before the fire due to technical problems. My recommendation is to investigate further before making a decision. We can hire an independent expert to evaluate the cause of the fire. The legal representative, Marcus Fry, shook his head. Reindold will not approve additional expenses. He wants to close this case as soon as possible. "Why the rush?" I asked. $5 million isn't a lot of money to throw around. "The owner of Harrison Plaza is Richard Donovan, a longtime friend of our director," Sarah Collins from the risk department said quietly. Reindold had already made it clear that he wanted a favorable decision. I exchanged glances with Jessica, who was making careful notes in her notebook. "I understand," I said slowly, "but we can't just ignore the weirdness. I propose a compromise. We'll approve the payment, but with a 20% reduction in the amount, citing the lack of security measures. This will give us a legal defense in case it later turns out that it was arson." After a short discussion, everyone agreed to my proposal. When the meeting was over, Jessica approached me. "So we're just going to give in?" she asked disappointedly. "Even though we know there's something fishy going on?" "Sometimes you have to retreat tactically to win strategically," I replied. "We can't win every battle, but we document all these cases. It'll come in handy someday." Jessica nodded, still not quite convinced, but willing to trust my experience. That evening, after work, I met Olivia at our favorite restaurant, a small Italian place in a quiet part of town, far enough away from the office that I wouldn't run into my colleagues. "How was your day?" she asked as we ordered. "The usual. Reindold is trying to push through a payment to his friend. I managed to get the amount down a little, but I still feel complicit." Olivia gave my hand a sympathetic squeeze. "You're doing what you can. Without you, they'd just pay the full amount without question." "I know," I sighed. "Sometimes it just feels like we're treading water. 2 years of fighting, and Reindold is still at the helm." "But we've made progress," Olivia countered. "We're up to 15% of the shares, and that's just the beginning." She was right. In 2 years, we'd managed to buy up a significant stake through various shell companies. No one at Freeman but the two of us knew that I was behind those purchases. Reindold, of course, had noticed that some of the stock was changing hands, but he didn't see it as a threat. "Speaking of stocks," I lowered my voice, though the restaurant was a little crowded. "My broker said another fund from the Cayman Islands is going to sell. That'll give us another 3%. Great, Olivia smiled. Soon we'll have enough to demand a seat on the board of directors. Not quite. I shook my head. Reinbold and his people still control more than 50%. We need to find a way to break that monopoly. We'll figure something out, Olivia said confidently. We have time. I stared at her, thinking about how lucky we were to have found each other. Our relationship had gone through different phases over the past 2 years, from initial romance to deep affection based on mutual respect and trust. We didn't advertise our relationship in the office, although many people certainly guessed. Reinbold probably knew, but he couldn't use it against us because the company didn't have strict rules about office romances. What are you thinking about? Olivia asked, noticing the look in my eyes. About us, I answered honestly. About how much had changed in the last 2 years. And how much has stayed the same, she added with a touch of sadness. Sometimes I feel like we're stuck in some kind of endless circle. Work, secret plans, work again. I understood her feelings, the constant tension in the office, the need to hide her true intentions, the lack of being able to just live without thinking about fighting Reinbolds. It was taking its toll on both of us. I know. I squeezed her hand. Sometimes I wonder if we shouldn't just leave Freeman, start something of our own, forget about this war. And then you think about your grandfather and what the Reinbolds did to his company, Olivia said quietly. She was the only person I ever told the truth about my origins. It was about 6 months into our relationship. I could no longer hide my true identity and motives from her. To my relief, Olivia took the news calmly, though she was surprised. That explains a lot, she said then. Yes, I nodded. It's not just about my grandfather. It's a matter of justice. Reinbolds took over the company by deception, manipulating the board of directors after my grandfather died. He has no right to run it. I know, Olivia said softly. And I'm with you. It's just hard sometimes. We finished dinner in a lighter atmosphere, discussing the new movie and the plans for the weekend. But even in those moments, I could feel the strain of the last few years taking its toll on our relationship. We were both exhausted from the constant struggle. The next day at the office, I noticed that Reinbolds was showing up on our floor more often than usual. He would stop at various desks, chatting casually with employees, giving the appearance of a friendly supervisor interested in the affairs of his subordinates. But I sensed that there was something behind it. My suspicion was confirmed when Jennifer from Human Resources approached me during my lunch break. She was one of the few people in the company who openly sympathized with me in my confrontation with Reinbolds. Be careful, she said quietly, pretending to discuss some paperwork. Reinbolds is gathering information about you. He's requested all your personnel files, performance reports, even your job interview results. Why? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. He's looking for a reason to fire you, Jennifer glanced around. He had Stein audit all your decisions for the last year. They're looking for any errors or irregularities. Thanks for the warning, I nodded gratefully. I'll be more careful. When Jennifer left, I wondered, why had Reinbolds decided to act now? What had changed? Maybe he suspected something about the stock purchase, or did it have something to do with the Harrison Plaza case? I shared this information with Olivia that evening. We were sitting in her apartment discussing the situation. This is serious, she said, tapping her fingers nervously on the table. If Reinbolds is digging for you, it means he knows or suspects something. Or he's just tired of my presence, I suggested. For 2 years I've been a thorn in his side. Maybe he's decided it's time to get rid of the problem. Either way, we need to be ready. Olivia stood up and started pacing the room. What could he possibly find? What mistakes could you have made? I wondered. In my 2 years on the job, I had tried to act flawlessly, knowing that any mistake would be used against me. But perfect people don't exist. There were a couple of questionable payment decisions, I admitted. Nothing criminal, but it could be interpreted as abuse of power if you wanted to. Which is what? Case Martin Sonsov. I approved the full payment, although the strict letter of the contract could reduce the amount by 30%. And another case with the restaurant Bristol, where I insisted on additional expertise which cost the company a tidy sum, but in the end allowed to reject the fraudulent claim. Both decisions were economically sound, Olivia said. You saved the company money in the long run. Yes, but Reindold's might see it differently. In the first case as a waste of money, in the second as an unnecessary delay in the process and unnecessary expense. Olivia nodded thoughtfully. We need to get ahead of him. Prepare documents that prove that your decisions were economically feasible. Show that you were acting in the best interests of the company. I'm already on it. I pulled a folder out of my briefcase. Here are all my controversial decisions for the last 2 years with justifications and calculations of economic effect. If Reindold's decides to attack, I'll have a defense. Olivia looked at me with respect. You're always one step ahead, aren't you? I try. I smiled weakly. Sometimes it feels like we're playing chess, though, with Reindold's changing the rules in the middle of the game. The next few days passed in tense anticipation. I felt the scrutiny not only of Reindold's, but also of Stein, who was now making frequent appearances in our department ostensibly to check on the financials. On Thursday, as I was returning from lunch, I was intercepted by Gregory. Reindold's wants to see you, he said with concern in his voice. Now. What was it about? He didn't say, but Stein and the company lawyer are with him. Doesn't look like a friendly conversation. I nodded, gathering my thoughts. Thanks, Gregory. I'm ready to go. As I rode the elevator up to the director's office, I mentally repeated the arguments for my decisions. If Reindold's thinks he can get rid of me easily, he's in for a surprise. In Reindold's office, the actors were already assembled, the director himself behind a massive desk, Stein with a folder of documents, and Richard Morris, the company's general counsel. They looked like a tribunal ready to pass judgment. Ah, Carol, come in. Reindold's pointed to the lone chair in front of the desk. We have a serious conversation to have. I sat down, keeping a calm expression on my face. I'm listening. Mr. Carroll, Stein began, opening a folder, we've audited your decisions over the past year and found a number of, shall we say, inconsistencies with corporate policy. Specifically? I raised an eyebrow questioningly. The Martinsons case. Stein pulled out the first document. You approved payment in full, ignoring Clause 12.3 of the contract, which allowed for a reduction. I did not ignore that clause, I objected calmly. I took into account all the circumstances of the case. The Martinsons were clients with 15 years' experience and had never once sought payment. Full compensation was not only fair, but economically justified. Losing such a client would have cost the company more than the difference in payout. That's your opinion, Reindold's interjected. It's not supported by any calculations. That's where you're wrong. I pulled my folder out of my briefcase and pulled out the first document. Here's a detailed analysis of the economic impact of my decision, including a calculation of long-term customer retention and reputational benefits. Stein took the document, gave it a quick glance, and frowned. It's all pretty words on paper, Reindold said. What about the Bristol restaurant? You spent $15,000 on additional expertise without consulting management, which saved the company $500,000 in unreasonable payments, I countered. What's more, the document approving the audit was signed by Deputy Gregory, acting within his authority, all according to protocol. I took another document out of the folder and handed it to Morris. The lawyer scrutinized the paper, then nodded reluctantly. Technically, it's correct, he admitted. The signature is there, the procedure is followed. Reindold's had clearly not expected such a rebuff. His face contorted with anger for a moment, but he quickly pulled himself together. "All right, Carol, you're prepared. That's commendable. But don't think this is the end of it. We'll continue to monitor your work very closely. I'm always open to scrutiny." I allowed myself a slight smile. My work speaks for itself. The department under my leadership has the best results in the company. That's a fact you can't deny. Rendolds looked at me with ill-concealed hatred. I realized that I had just won the battle, but the war was far from over. What's more, I'd made it even more personal. "Dismissed," Rendolds muttered. "Goodbye." As I left the office, I took a deep breath. The first attack had been repulsed, but Rendolds wouldn't stop. He'll look for other ways to get rid of me. Now I had to be doubly careful. I walked down to my floor where Olivia was waiting for me, glancing anxiously toward the elevator. "What's up?" she asked quietly as I approached. "We're hanging in there for now," I answered just as quietly. "But Rendolds is just getting started. He won't stop until he finds a way to get rid of me." "Or until we get rid of him." Olivia clenched her fists. "We need to speed up the stock process." I nodded. Time was working against us. Rendolds felt threatened and was preparing to act decisively. We had to get ahead of him before it was too late. That night when I got home, I sat at my computer for a long time, going over the financial statements and analyzing Freeman's shareholder structure. Somewhere there had to be a vulnerability in the system Rendolds had built, and I intended to find it, whatever it took. The conference room on the top floor of Freeman's headquarters was filled to capacity. All the department heads, board members, and key employees were gathered for a special meeting called by Rendolds. I sat in the third row next to Olivia, who was nervously tapping her pen on her notepad. The tension in the air was almost palpable. Rendolds, Stein, and Morris were seated at the long podium table. Their faces were serious, but I could see the ill-concealed satisfaction in the CEO's eyes. He was clearly anticipating a pleasant moment. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Rendolds began, rising from his seat. "We have a situation that requires immediate attention. We are talking about a breach of corporate ethics and malfeasance in office." He paused dramatically, and I felt dozens of eyes turn in my direction. The news of my confrontation with Rendolds had long ago ceased to be a company secret. "As you know, Freeman has always prioritized honesty and transparency," Rendolds continued. "Unfortunately, not all employees share those values." He looked directly at me. "Mr. Carroll, please come over here." I slowly stood up. Olivia looked at me anxiously, but I nodded slightly, letting her know that everything was going according to plan. I had expected this moment and I was ready. As I walked out to the podium table, I turned to face the room. My colleagues were watching with different emotions, some with sympathy, some with curiosity, some with outright gloating. "Mr. Carroll." Rendolds placed a folder of documents in front of me. "In the course of our internal investigation, we found serious misconduct on your part. You have systematically used company resources for personal gain, exceeded your authority to make decisions, and most seriously, collected confidential information about the company's management without authority." A whisper swept through the room. I kept a calm expression on my face, never taking my eyes off Rendolds. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" he asked with fake concern in his voice. "Before I answer," I said in an even voice, "I would like to see proof of these accusations. Concrete facts, documents, evidence." Rendolds smirked and nodded to Stein, who pulled several sheets of paper out of a folder. "Here are printouts of your emails, where you request information about the company's financial situation from employees not related to your department. Here's a system administrator's report on your computer's access to restricted areas of the corporate network. And finally, here's a copy of your personal notebook, found in your desk, detailing all the, as you call them, questionable decisions by the company's management."
I took a look at the documents. They were authentic, albeit taken out of context. I did keep a notebook in my desk, but in a secure compartment. Someone had searched it in my absence.
Thank you for the clarification, I said, straightening up. Now I'm ready to answer. All of my actions were for the sole benefit of the company. I was requesting information as part of a project to optimize claims processes, as evidenced by other letters that were not included in your collection for some reason. I paused, looking into the eyes of those present. As for questionable decisions, I did keep records, not for blackmail or manipulation, but to protect Freeman's interests. Over the past 3 years, the company's management has made a number of decisions that are contrary not only to the spirit set forth by the founder, but also to sound economic sense. Rendolds went on a rampage. You're out of line, Carol. Who gave you the right to judge my decisions? You're just an ordinary employee. Not exactly, I said calmly. And that's where we get to the heart of the problem. It's not what I do. It's who I am. There was absolute silence in the hall. Even Reindold's froze, sensing that the situation was out of his control. My name is Elliot Blackhorse, I said clearly. I am the grandson of Gerald Blackhorse, founder of Freeman, and I own 33% of the company through a trust set up by my grandfather. The effect was like a bomb going off. The faces of those present expressed shock, disbelief, and in some, sudden understanding. Reindold seemed to be speechless. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. It's impossible, he said at last. Blackhorse had no heirs. His shares were distributed after his death according to his will. Wrong, I shook my head. My grandfather had set up a secret trust in the name of my mother, his only daughter, who, for personal reasons, lived under a different last name. Upon her death, the rights to the shares passed to me. All this time I preferred to remain an anonymous shareholder, watching you manage my grandfather's legacy. I pulled a folded document from my inside jacket pocket and held it out to Morris. Here's the legal proof of my words. A notarized deed of trust and a certificate of inheritance. My lawyers will provide any additional materials you need. Morris took the paper with trembling hands and began to read. As he read, his face grew more and more serious. Finally, he looked up and nodded slowly. The document looks genuine, he said. If it is, then Mr. Blackhorse is indeed the company's largest individual shareholder. But 33% is not a controlling interest, Stein quickly interjected, coming to Reindold's rescue. You can't make decisions on your own anyway. Quite right, I agreed. That's why I've been buying shares on the open market through various investment companies for the past 3 years. Today I own another 20% of the stock. That's a total of 53%, a controlling interest. Now Reindold's eyes were filled with real fear. He realized he had lost. All his plans and manipulations were crumbling before his eyes. You're bluffing, he tried. There's no proof of these purchases. Oh, there is, I smiled. My lawyer has already sent all the documents to the board of directors and the Securities Commission. In fact, from now on I can call a special meeting of shareholders and put the question of changing the management of the company. There was a sepulchral silence in the hall. All eyes were fixed on Reindold's, waiting for his reaction. He stood with his hands on the table, his face pale and his eyes darting around the room as if looking for a way out. You can't, he began, but his voice faltered. You have no idea how to run a company of this size. You'll destroy everything I've built. You didn't create anything, Reindold's, I said firmly. You inherited the company my grandfather created and systematically destroyed its soul, its essence. Freeman was founded not to maximize shareholder profits, but to serve its customers, to create a fair system of protection against life's hardships. My grandfather believed in that, and so do I. I turned to the audience. For 3 years I've worked here, getting to know the company from the inside out. I've seen the dedication of many of you. your professionalism, your desire to help people. But I've also seen how management's policies undermine those values, how short-term profits are put before the long-term well-being of the company and its customers. I paused, giving the words a chance to penetrate the minds of my listeners. Today, I'm not going to fire anyone or do a purge. That's not my goal. I want to take Freeman back to its roots, to the principles my grandfather established, and I invite all of you to join me in that journey. A whisper rippled through the room. I saw some faces brighten and others show a look of doubt or even fear. Change is always scary, even if it's for the better. Reinbold seemed to finally realize the hopelessness of his situation. He straightened up, adjusted his tie, and said with feigned calm, "In that case, I'm resigning. Immediately. I don't want to be part of the destruction of what I've spent years building." "I accept your resignation," I nodded, "but I must point out that there will be no destruction, only rebuilding. I appreciate your contribution to the company, but our visions for its future are too different." Reinbold gathered up his papers, threw one last rueful glance in my direction, and walked quickly out of the room. Stein followed after a moment's hesitation. Morris stayed behind, still studying the documents I had provided. I addressed the others. "The shareholders' meeting will be held in 2 weeks. Until then, I ask everyone to continue their work as usual. Gregory," I turned to my immediate superior, who was looking at me with genuine surprise, "as a senior manager, you will temporarily assume the duties of the executive director. All important decisions will be coordinated with me." Gregory nodded uncertainly, still not quite realizing the transformation that had taken place. "The meeting is over," I announced. "Thank you for your attention." People began to disperse, talking animatedly about what they had heard. Some came up to me to express support or ask questions. I answered briefly, promising more detailed explanations in the near future. Finally, the hall emptied, and we were alone with Olivia. She walked over to me, her face a mixture of relief, pride, and slight anxiety. "You did it," she said quietly. "You finally showed your cards." "I had no choice," I sighed. "Reinbold's had me cornered. Any more and he'd find a way to get rid of me." "So, what now?" Olivia sat down on the edge of the table. "Are you really going to be CEO?" "Temporarily," I nodded, "until I find the right person for the job. I don't plan to run the company personally, but I need to make sure it gets back on track." Olivia looked at me thoughtfully. "You know, I always suspected there was something special about you. From day one, you weren't like the average freshman. Too confident, too. Determined. And yet you didn't guess who I really was." I smiled. "No," she shook her head. "Though maybe somewhere in the back of my mind I felt a connection between you and the company. You spoke of it with such a possessive feeling." We were silent for a moment, each absorbed in our own thoughts. Finally, Olivia asked, "What's going to happen to us, now that you're the boss and I'm just an employee?" I took her hands in mine and looked her seriously in the eyes. "You were never just someone, Olivia. You were and still are my partner, my rock. I couldn't have done it without you, and I want you to be there for me in life and in work." "Is that a marriage proposal?" She smiled weakly. "Just the position for now," I laughed. "For the rest, I'd have to choose a more romantic setting than a conference room after a corporate scandal. But I promise this moment won't be long in coming." Olivia pressed herself against me and I hugged her, feeling the tension of the last few years finally let go. We'd won, but the real work was just beginning. The next 2 weeks flew by in a whirlwind of events. The news of the change in power at Freeman spread instantly. The press demanded comment, clients and partners demanded assurances of stability, employees demanded clarity about the future. I held endless meetings, gave interviews, reassured, explained, persuaded. Reinbold, as I expected, did not go quietly. He tried to challenge my rights to the shares, accused me of manipulation, and even threatened legal action. But the legal position was on my side, and gradually his resistance waned. Eventually, he accepted a generous severance package and disappeared from view. Stein also left the company, but several other top managers decided to stay, accepting the new reality. Among them was Harrison, who, as Olivia had predicted, turned out to be a pragmatist, willing to work with any management as long as they acted in the company's best interests. At the shareholders' meeting, I was officially confirmed as chairman of the board. To everyone's surprise, I proposed Gregory as CEO. Despite his initial hesitancy in confronting Reinbold's, he was an experienced insurer, knew the company inside out, and shared my values. With my support and the help of a revitalized management team, he could become exactly the kind of leader Freeman needed. Olivia was promoted to Director of Development, a new position created specifically to implement strategic initiatives to bring the company back to its roots. Her first project was to develop a new line of insurance products for low-income families, an idea my grandfather had once proposed but rejected by Reinbold's as not economically feasible. A month after the dramatic events in the conference room, I stood at the window of my new office, the same one my grandfather once occupied. On the wall hung his portrait, painted in oil many years ago. A gray-haired man with shrewd eyes and a kind smile looked at me as if approving my actions. There was a knock on the door, and Olivia walked in. "The meeting's in 5 minutes," she said. "The development team is ready to present the prototype of the new insurance claims processing system." "Coming." I nodded, taking a break from looking at the portrait. Olivia stepped closer and took my hand. "He'd be proud of you," she said quietly, looking at the portrait. "You brought his company back to life." "I hope so." I squeezed her hand. "Sometimes I think he planned the whole thing. The will, the trust, even my return after his death. He was always thinking several moves ahead. Like you," Olivia smiled. "A family trait, apparently." We left the office and headed to the conference room where the team was waiting for us. Along the way, we passed by the staff's workstations, many of whom nodded or smiled affably. The atmosphere in the office had changed. The tension had disappeared. There was more energy, enthusiasm, and creativity. Of course, not everything was perfect. Some old problems remained and new challenges appeared. Reorienting the company to a more socially responsible approach required time and resources. Some shareholders were concerned about a possible decline in profits in the short term, but I was confident that, in the long term, this path would lead to prosperity. We were greeted in the conference room by a young, energetic development team. Among them was Jessica, my former intern, now a full-fledged member of the innovation team. Looking at these people, their enthusiasm and belief in the future of the company, I felt that all the difficulties and trials of the last years were not in vain. Freeman was returning to its roots, to my grandfather's vision, to be not just an insurance company, but a trusted partner in people's lives, helping them overcome challenges and build a secure future. And I was ready to dedicate my life to continuing that legacy with Olivia by my side in both my personal life and professional life. As the presentation began, I caught Olivia's gaze across the table. She smiled, and in that smile I saw a reflection of my own feelings, pride in the work she had accomplished, excitement for new challenges, and a deep, sincere love that had been born in the most unexpected circumstances and had withstood all challenges. My grandfather's legacy was in good hands, and now we were creating a legacy of our own that I hoped would be just as lasting and meaningful.